All right, everyone, welcome. We're going today to continue to talk about imagination in poems, and as you can see, we spent a whole class on this, and we're going to spend another whole class on this. That's because this is one of the more complex parts of the quadrant. It's just that imagination is complex, for one thing, but also because this is one of the things that you can really push, and there's so many ways to push your imagination. I mean, there is, the lyric images, the choice of images, there's similes, which we've talked about, there's metaphors, which we've talked about, for example, with the Jack Gilbert poem where he's just carrying a box. It was an extended metaphor, and that box represents grief. And then there's surrealism, which we'll talk about today. Magical realism, you've probably talked about in your short story classes. Okay, and so there's just so much complexity to imagination. Okay, and so many ways to do it. And I want to make sure that you have all of these tools in your toolbox. Okay? All right, but we were talking about James Kimball's poem, Mount Pisgah, on Tuesday. And so I'd like to talk about one more poem by James Kimball that's hiding the story. Because a lot of people don't really like to tell their story. And we're also going to talk about another way to hide the story before the class is over with, using a persona and myth. Okay? But we're going to talk about this right here. This is James Kimball, is in his first book, Gatehouse Heaven. And it's a clear poem that is a clear story. Something he does, okay? So I'll just read it, and then we'll talk about what I think is underlying in the poem. And this poem is a lot like oranges. And when I said you could just read the poem, enjoy the poem, and not have to think about it any further. But there's also something going on underneath the surface. Okay? So, Allen's Lake. It was the window I remember, and the moment before jumping to the woodpile and white grass. It's the blue breath of palominos and the swinging gable light, the frozen stubble against my wrist each night I crawled under the gate. And once where the waves lipped the rotted dock rafters, though I'd been warned, I climbed out on the last slim beam that jutted high across the water. Boots slick against the frost-crystalled edges, I tight-rope stepped at least 10 feet and stopped there. From that height, close to the star-bleared pine tips, I felt that lake take me into account. I was another far object steeped in the slow mist, a sound gathered together past a crooked beach of bank mulch and snapped sticks, a catch in the half-whistle of oaks. This was years before I'd seen how easily a body could get lost in that mud-stuffed Hines County cold, or how old sawtooth boards are bridges over bones that sink to the bottom of winter. I stood there, shivering, 5 minutes of luck, confident that even falling could last forever. Arms scarecrowed for balance, I listened in my careful backtracking to the wind tumble into a north-facing gust, white ribs of moon breaking on the water, one layer of light coming down, one layer of light slipping under. Now before we talk about hiding the story, I just want to, appreciate this a lot that this poem is doing. Okay? I want you to notice, for example, the wondrous use of assonance and alliteration. The rotted dock rafters. There's something I may not have mentioned, that when you want to do assonance and alliteration, it's best to get the sounds as close to each other as possible. Then the reader really notices it. So if this rotted was up here and say the second line, and this dock was where it is, it wouldn't really work. If they're in the same line, it works. If they are in the line before or the line after, it works. Okay? And you have like the blue breath of palominos. You have the wonderful thing he does where he goes outside of his own viewpoint and he becomes the lake. From that height, close to the star-bleared pine tips, and I like this, the pine tips are not really tall, they're star-bleared, so that tells you how tall they are by going to space. Okay? So I felt that lake take me into account. So he's in the lake's viewpoint. And please note, he tells you he's in the lake's viewpoint. He's not making you guess. We do that in poems. A lot of people think, oh, you're supposed to hide and hide and hide and make the reader work really hard, but not really. Readers, you know, they want to enjoy your poem, they want to love your poem. They don't necessarily like being confused. I'm not saying there aren't some readers who like that, but most readers don't. Most readers want to enjoy something else about poetry. They want to enjoy the music, the rhythm, the sounds, the word choice, the story itself. Being confused, they don't mind being confused a little bit as long as you unconfuse them before it's over with. It's like, is it Matrix, I believe, is the movie? I know, I don't watch a lot of movies. For some reason I watched this one. Yeah, I was pretty confused all the way through, but by the time I was finished, I knew what was going on, right? There's a short story called Until Gwen by Dennis Lehane. Until Gwen, if you haven't read it, it's a great story. And it's really confusing. It's in second person. The dialogue is very much a fight. The father and the son are talking to each other, and they're fighting with each other. And at one point, the son, who's just gotten out of prison, goes and buys some super glue. And you're like, what? Why? Okay, second day out of prison, you're buying super glue. No idea why. A couple pages later, you find out why. Okay, so you don't mind being confused as long as it's cleared up, right? So this, he doesn't, I felt that lake take me into account. He tells you exactly where he is and what's happening. The lake has now made him into a slow mist, a sound gathered together past a crooked beach, a bank watch, and snap sticks, a catch in the half whistle evokes. So again, you have the beautiful sounds. Beach, bank, snapped, half, and there's one other short A. Half, okay, bank, snapped, half. You've got three short A's right in a row, and you've got the beach of bank watch. You know, this is just gorgeous language. And there's this right here that does, that even falling could last forever. Arms scarecrowed for balance. So he's taken a noun and he's turned it into a verb. So instead of saying, I walked with my arms out as if I was a scarecrow, he just gives you one word, scarecrowed. Okay, so that's a wonderful move to make in poetry. It's the conciseness of language that you're looking for, and it's done very well. Yes, Rachel?
Do you know, like, why, for example, like in the second stanza, there's a break at after tightrope, and then stepped, it starts the new line? Like, it seems like the author did that several times, and I was just wondering if you know, like, what their reasoning was for, or I have an idea.
Meter. In his
Meter?
first book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in his first book, James was, I'll use his word, lockjawed. Very tight with meter. It's not specific, it's not a definite rhythm like iambic or trochee or spondy, but it's a certain number of stresses per line.
Okay.
So that's what it did. The same thing with the Mount Pisgah when he broke on the word was, which made me go, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because he knows not to break on a to-be verb. Okay, so it's meter, and we'll talk about that in a different class. Okay, and I'll tell you how to use it in your short stories as well as in your poetry. Okay, so let's talk about hiding the story though. I think, okay, knowing James Kimball, okay, remember he's from Mississippi, 1970s Mississippi. Have you all seen, read about like people being murdered? A lot of people, my parents were sharecroppers, my grandparents were sharecroppers, on and on. And so I've read a lot about sharecropping. And they started doing, they started keeping records and trying to get sharecroppers to come forth and give their stories and turn in their, basically they were human slaves, so I'll, turn in their owners basically. So in the early 1900s, and a lot of times, there's so many times when people turned in their owners and then disappeared. Okay, before I'd seen how easily a body could get lost in that mud-stuffed Hinds County cold. They got lost, they disappeared. You never heard from them again. And we know what happened. We know what happened to them, right? You turn in somebody for keeping you a slave in 1901, we know what happened. Okay, so, and I didn't tell you that James Kimball, he doesn't write about this, but his parents, his grandparents were Lebanese, his father was Lebanese. He was I remember James Kimball told me that he really loved Governor Wilder of Virginia because Governor Wilder looked exactly like his father. Governor Wilder was the first African-American governor in Virginia. It was a really big deal because his grandparents were slaves. So I was like, oh, James Kimball, okay. So he's presents as a white person, but his father presents as a black person, Lebanese. His grandmother also presented as a black person. So this is who he grew up with. So he's writing about racism in his poems, but he's not writing, you can't really see it, it's under the surface. So one thing I think of when I read James's poems is there something going on under the surface? He's doing the Mary Oliver, tell me your despair and I'll tell you mine. But he does it. He's not going to tell you his despair in his poem. He's going to write about something else. But I want you to notice something like the verbs in this poem, okay? And once were the waves lipped the rotted dock rafters. What would you normally say? Was it lipped? What's another verb for that? Once were the lapped, maybe? Yes, once were the waves lapped. That's what we always say, right? Lipped is a wonderful verb. It works, but it's also a body part, right? It's lips, it's a body part. Another place where he does this is, or how old saw-toothed boards are bridges over bones that sink to the bottom of winter. And he saw-toothed boards. I mean, that's an image that you can see, like a board that has been sawed. And with saws, they actually have teeth. That's what you call them, those things that are sharp and go through wood. So it's an image that works on the level of that. That's exactly what it is, but at the same time, it's an image that's pushing itself. He's chosen to say saw-toothed boards. He's chosen to give you another body part. Over bridges, bridges over bones. This is it, bridges over bones that sink. He's actually giving you bones in the water. I mean, think about Mississippi, think about swamps, think about big lakes, think about the rivers. How do you get rid of a body? What is it? Are there alligators there? I'm going to assume there are.
Mississippi?
Yes, yes, definitely. I was thinking, yes, there would be alligators. A good way to get rid of a body, right? You just sink it in a swamp. You sink it in the sweet quicksand. You sink it in a place where there are alligators, a lake, a river. Okay, so he's giving you that. He's giving you the body right there. And, having read a great deal about murdering of people in, especially with sharecroppers, how the murdering people and how the bodies were dumped off bridges, dumped into lakes, dumped into rivers. I'm thinking, that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about people who have been disappeared. Okay, the other thing he does is this gorgeous thing here. For balance, I listened in my careful backtracking to the wind tumble into a north-facing gust, white ribs of moon breaking on the water. Okay, so he could have just said white beams of moon, the moon beams reflecting on the water. I'm trying to think, in a first draft you were writing this poem. White, but he's got you the breaking and he's got ribs. So what we're seeing here is a body that has been beaten. But you see how well hidden that is. You see how it works on one level, and you don't have to think about that at all, and it's a gorgeous poem, and you just read it and you enjoy it. But if you really want to dig into it and think about it, you see how that works. You've got the breaking of ribs, you've got the lips, you've got the teeth, you've got the bones, and then we have this of moon breaking on the water, one layer of light coming down, one layer of light slipping under. How many of you have heard that saying that when you die, your light goes out? So we have the light, yes, the light, so the light is going under, someone has died in this poem. And that's pretty amazing, right? You'd have to, I'm not sure exactly why he chooses to hide his story. I've never asked him that. I never asked Mary Oliver that. But this is an amazing way to tell a story and nevertheless hide the story. So it's also just something that I want you to think about. Your poems need to work on one surface. Many people, when they write poems, they like to think about the symbols. They like to think about, what's the reader going to see and how is the reader going to interpret this. And, I'm going to ask you not to do that. Basically, you want to write a poem that works on the surface and is just a gorgeous poem. And you let the readers do the work of finding the bones. Okay? All right, now we've talked about how similes work to help you see something that someone else has not seen. For example, the men walking on the moon who said the moon dust was like plaster. Or the first man who flew a space capsule on the backside of the moon. The backside of the moon looks like high desert. Okay? So that's a very good use of similes. Like, you've seen something, no one else has seen it, and everything you've seen, no one else has seen. That's the wonderful thing about it. This classroom right now, you all see it, but you all see it differently. You all experience it differently. Okay? So how you choose to write the similes is going to tell the reader what emotion you're feeling, what it is that you're trying to do in your poem. It sets tone. You know, it says, you know, like if the room is lit up like a circus, that's a happy tone, unless you don't like circuses. But if the room is like a dank cave, that's a sad tone. So it sets tone, and it tells the reader something you've seen. You all have probably read Carolyn Forshay's Colonel. It's a pretty famous prose poem. So it looks like prose, it doesn't look like a poem. And it's a poem. It's been anthologized in poetry anthologies and in short flash fiction anthologies. And Carolyn Forshey, this is her second book, The Country Between Us. And she was in El Salvador. It's a long story, which I'll tell you later. It's a long, interesting story. But she was in El Salvador, and she had dinner at a colonel's house. It was 1978, 1979, right before the Civil War started. And she was being, you know, taken around because she had won a Fulbright, I believe. And people wanted her to basically be a poet and come back to America and stop the Civil War that was coming. She said, I'm a poet. Nobody listens to poets. And they said, make them listen. So that's, in South and Central America, they listen to poets. They put them in jail, they killed them. In this country, they just, I don't know. But we're going to make them listen to poets, right? Yes. Okay. So she was there at the dinner, and there's, you know, it's a beautiful poem, and it gets to the point in the poem where the colonel stands up, leaves the room. The person she's with looks at her and says, don't say anything. The colonel comes back with a grocery bag, and the poem is a grocery bag, you know, a bag just like you would carry groceries home from the store. And then he dumps it out, and it's dried, severed ears. Now, this poem is like pretty much an imagistic poem with very few similes. Okay, so this one point, now what do I do at this point? She's thinking to herself. And then the colonel picks up one of the ears, dumps it in a glass of water, where, as he writes, it comes alive there. And he says something like, tell your people to go fuck themselves. A good line for your poetry, eh? That's how it ends, something like that. It's more beautiful than that. It's actually anapest rhythm, so it's more beautiful than that. But at the point where the ears are dumped out, she's probably, when she's writing this poem, thinking to herself, most of my readers probably have not seen a grocery bag full of severed ears. So she gives us a simile. The ears were like dried peach halves. All right, now you'll never be able to eat peach halves again the same way.
Oh, I doubt that.
But the point is, the ears is the part you've never seen. The peach halves is the part you have seen. If you have not, you can run down to the co-op and get yourself some peach halves. Okay? There are times, though, when you don't want to write a simile. Oh, shoot, I just blanked on his name, but a very famous Central American poet had watched the riots in the streets, and he'd watched the police killing the people, and he came back inside, and he wrote, writing a poem. He said, the blood of the children ran in the streets like, he line breaks right there. And, you know, what in the world, what can you say? The blood of the children ran in the streets like, sometimes you don't need a simile. Because what are you going to say? Like a river, like Coca-Cola? I mean, there's nothing you can compare the blood of the children running in the streets, really, without lessening the image of the blood of the children. So what he wrote was, the blood of the children ran in the streets like the blood of children. There's a lesson. Sometimes the image is enough. Sometimes you want a simile. It's the thing to remember. But we know the big important thing, similes, metaphors will give the reader your experience. And will set tone and will show the reader something you've experienced and they have it. But there's one other thing that similes are, and that's just plain fun. I know, they're kind of hard to write, but they can be a lot of fun. And you get to show off your genius. But Aristotle said, the person who can write a metaphor is a genius, right? So you get to show off your genius. So this is Tom Andrews did here in Cinema Verite, The Death of Alfred Lord Tennyson. Does everyone know who Alfred Lord Tennyson is? Lord Alfred Tennyson. Oh,
Probably like a poet.
my English majors. 1800s romantic poet, right? Okay, he's dead already, don't worry, when he dies in this poem, it's okay, okay? And notice this poem is set up like a cinema. It's set up like a play, like someone's writing a movie script. So here you have director's notes. The camera pans a gorgeous snow-filled landscape, rolling hills, large black trees, a frozen river. The snow falls and falls. The camera stops to find Tennyson in an armchair in the middle of a snowy field. Tennyson. It's snowing. The snow is like crushed aspirin, like bits of paper. No, it's like gauze bandages, clean teeth, shoelaces, headlights. No, I'm getting too old for this. It's like a huge t-shirt that's been chewed by a dog. It's like semen, confetti, chalk, seashells, wood smoke, ash, soap, trillium, solitude, daydreaming. Oh, hell, you can see for yourself. That's what I hate about film. He dies. You've got to imagine that Tom Andrews loved writing this poem. I mean, he's just like, okay, snow. I mean, you're thinking about snow right now, and you know what snow looks like. You know what, clean teeth, shoelaces, headlights, trillium, semen, a dog, a t-shirt that's been chewed by a dog. I mean, just crumb and solitude, daydreaming, and I don't know what it's like. You can see it for yourself. It's like, it's like, but it's just so much fun. Just anything that even vaguely looks like snow, let's just throw it down there. Anything that's white, ashes are not white, but they sort of look like snow. I mean, it doesn't matter. It just has fun, right? And that's part of what writing similes is about also. You just enjoy yourself, okay? And that, I think, is in a prose, shape of prose. So I just wanted to bring up the idea that if you really don't want to do line breaks, you can do prose poems. But this one, If My Father Were to Ask, is a prose poem, and it's very much a poem that's set in place and landscape and story, but it also goes into something very imaginative. So, if my father were to ask, what's a prose poem? I would turn my face and look into the distance away from our farmhouse, into a wild copse of trees which runs from the road's edge and on up the hill to the far fields. Box elder, green ash, and black locust tangle in a net of branches tied together by thorny greenbrier. I know of a coyote den beneath one old box elder tree on the edge of a gully cutting through the copse. If I were to stick my hand into the hole, I could feel cool, wet air and perhaps the playful teeth of pups. Remember when you plowed the fields in the spring, I say to my father, and the air behind you filled suddenly with seagulls? I can see him inhale the aroma of memory. The green and yellow tractor, the motor exhaust and dust, steel blades of the plow sinking into the earth and turning it. The smell all sexual and holy, worms and grubs uncovered into sunlight. Then an unexpected slash of white as the gulls materialize behind the plow 1,000 miles and more from any ocean. So it's a beautiful, imagistic story poem with, maybe that really did happen. Maybe the gulls really did materialize 1,000 miles from any ocean. Or maybe it's imagined. Maybe that's what a poem is, where something suddenly explodes, where there's a real toad in an imaginary garden, or a real garden with an imaginary toad. Something explodes from the poem, is the point. Okay, something explodes. So it's starting to go into imagination. This poem here by Gregory Orr, we've been talking about his essay, The Four Achievements of Poetry. It's high time we brought in a poem by him, right? Song of the Invisible Corpse in the Field. So from the title, you know that this poem is an invisible corpse in the field, and this is the song of the corpse. So from the title, you already know this is going to be a very imaginary poem. Also, I think this counts as surreal, since I'm going to assume that in reality, I'm the last person in the world to say this because I'm pretty sure the corpses do sing, but let's just assume they don't. And so in reality, there's not really a corpse that's invisible, that's in a field, that's singing. So This is surreal, okay? And this is the corpse speaking, song of the invisible corpse of the field, and still I lie here, bruised by rain, gored by the tiny horns of sprouting grass. And all the while I hum the song of spiders drawing across the dulled mirrors of my eyes. Accurate maps the spirit might use. Always death at the center, like Rome or some oasis toward which all paths tend. I am the absence under your feet, the pit that opens, toothed with dew. I really like the way he's using verbs like toothed, like, saw-toothed boards and toothed with dew instead of just covered in dew or wet with dew. Things like that, we just pump up your verbs, really make for a much better poem, and also it helps in your fiction. Do you see what is happening in this poem? We have a corpse speaking to Greg, speaking to us, and this corpse is an absence. Emotionally, this poem works. The thing about surreal is it has to work logically and emotionally. You can't just be walking into the classroom and suddenly dragons are coming out of the ground. There has to be a reason for why dragons are coming out of the ground. The reason I say this poem works is because I know Greg's bio. He accidentally, in a hunting accident, shot his younger brother and killed his younger brother. I think Greg was 12 and his younger brother was 9. So this is who is speaking in this poem, is the younger brother. The younger brother is always there. He is always the invisible corpse. It was in a field, right? Literally. And the brother is always there, and he's always the absence under Greg's feet. Okay, so let's just talk for a second about, how when you would choose to use surrealism. Okay, so you would think about, for example, I'm going to make a long story short. Let's just give you an example from my life. I was coming to work one day last year, and there had been a wreck right in front of me. And to make the long story short, the woman who was driving died. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt. She was thrown from the vehicle. She died. So every time I come to work, I pass this location. Now, my nephew died in the exact same way. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. His vehicle, he was thrown from the vehicle, and he died. Every time I drive past that location, I remember that woman, and I remember my nephew. So logically, emotionally, I can be writing a poem about this. Driving to work, I pass where the woman died, and I remember my nephew, and emotionally, it would work for my nephew to suddenly be sitting in the truck seat beside me, talking to me. Okay, so it would work logically. Another way that it would work would be if, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that you were writing a poem about a busload of children that crashed into a lake on a snowy morning. Okay, so now I'm making up a poem right now. Okay, but let's say they were on their way somewhere. They were on their way to the Nationals to compete in a competition, and they had been practicing for all that year Richard Wagner's The Ride of the Valkyries. Do you all know what The Ride of the Valkyries is? Well, it's the third part of an opera. Let me see if I can... I was hoping I could find a picture. Okay, so Valkyries, no one knows what that is? Matt, could you please tell us what the Valkyries are?
They are from Scandinavian mythology. They were a group of warriors, women. Some people have said they were mortal and then they became divine or close to. Others say they were like always divine, but they're warriors that are like equivalent to Vikings.
Yes, the female, and they ride in, at least I believe they ride in on horses. So this is why, when I'm choosing my poem here, they ride into the battlefield on horses. They take the people who died in battle, and they choose half of them to go back.
The honorable.
The honorable. And I believe I read somewhere that any woman who dies in childbirth is automatically taken. But Okay, you'll have to look it up yourself. But the reason I wanted to choose this particular Ride of the Valkyries, of Wagner's opera, they've been practicing all year. So I would begin the poem something like, the children had practiced Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries all year. That morning, an unexpected snowstorm made the road slick, and then the bus runs off into the lake, and they all drown. Okay, if I wanted to write a poem, hopefully I'd write a little bit better than that, but that's basically the setup. And then, for it to become surreal, think about this. If you have someone drowning in a lake, every time you see that lake, you're going to remember that person who drowned. If by chance that lake is connected to the, it doesn't even have to be connected to the town's water supply. Okay? If you could make the leap that every time there's water, you think of those children, right? So, at this point, I can turn on the water faucet in the kitchen and the water, the children's voices come out singing. Okay? That's surreal. That would work. I could also, the reason I chose Ride of the Valkyries is because they ride in on horses. I could go very, very, I could go very extensive, and I could talk about the rising sound of the violins, and I could talk about the drum beats coming in, the tempo. I could go lines and lines and lines, or I could go very short and subtle, and I could say every time the faucet turns on, they feel the horse's breath at the back of their necks. Or I could say the yards, every morning they go out to pick up the newspaper, the yards are torn up by horse hooves. And then the reader, hopefully, this is a nice thing about poetry, you can trust that your reader is smart. And you can trust that they will either know what this is or they will Google it. They'll say, why are there so many horses in this poem? And they will know, because the Valkyries come in on their horses. Okay, so you can go subtle, you feel the horse breath, or you hear the horse's hoof steps coming from the distance, or you can go as extensive as you want and you just give us like an entire opera. Okay, so, but you see the emotional logic of that. Because they drowned in the lake, now water is connected with them. Okay, so emotionally, surreal needs to work. And now, fact of the matter is, I've seen a lot of surreal poems that are published that I would be inclined to say don't work, but they didn't have me for a teacher. You have me for a teacher, you will be the best poets. That's what I'm saying, okay? It's my job to make you into the best poets possible. Okay? So here's another poem that's working sort of on a surreal level, okay? But definitely on an imaginative level. This is Kristen Bach. It's from her first book, Cloisters. And if you like lyric poems, this entire book is lyric poetry. Short lyric poetry. So I would recommend it. Wintering. All night, hemlocks dropped their cones on stone steps. If the cones were slippers, I'd unlock the latch for the woman who fled from her home in her nightgown. From under the purple shade of the pines, she'd come to warm her feet in my hands. If her gown were hemmed in hailstones, I folded over my shoulders to thaw, and with my lips drop a seed under her tongue. We'd fall asleep listening as the pines mourn the waxwings, those birds in black masks who huddled on high limbs, passing berries from one mouth to another. So you see the logic of this. She's living in a home in which, it's an older home, so the woman who used to live there, probably in the 1800s, maybe 1900s, who fled the home, fled probably a violent situation in her nightgown. And so now she's imagining this woman coming back. Okay. And this is, if the cones were slippers. So this is logical because the woman fled in her slippers. I'd unlock the latch for the woman who fled from her home in her nightgown. This is something to think about, especially where you live, because of, the idea that there's so much, or no matter where you live, there's just we're walking on top of death, right? No matter where we live, there's probably someone who's died under our feet or buried under our feet. People are making faces. A couple of you, in your 10-story ideas, told me you had haunted houses, or are going to move into haunted houses. I mean, why are these houses haunted? Why are these people stuck here? You could write the poem in which you talk to the house haunter. We have the Trail of Tears that went right through southern Illinois. I used to live, I had 2 acres in the Shawnee National Forest where I built a house. And where the Trail of Tears is, I think my house is pretty much right on top of the Trail of Tears. So, I could very much write a poem in which, I am surrounded by these people. And you know, Southern Illinois is where they got caught by the frozen Mississippi River. They arrived in Southern Illinois right at the beginning of December, right when it was terribly cold. The Mississippi River was really bad winter that year, worse than normal. The Mississippi River had chunks of ice the size of houses coming down it. They couldn't cross. They ended up having to camp here in Southern Illinois. So this is where they were for months, stuck and dying. So there's so much history here. And then you know, you had lynchings in Cairo. Did I pronounce that right? Cairo. You have the mining disasters. Okay, so we have so much history here. And some of you live in haunted houses, so you have this, you know, this is something to think about, Joey. What if these people, you know, came back? Or could you open the door and invite them back? Now, Song by Bridget Pagine Kelly. This is kind of a long poem, but it's also a gorgeous poem. Bridget Pagine Kelly, I highly recommend her poems. She's a lovely poet, and most of her poems are like this. They're biblical, they're mythical, they're just huge poems. And always something happens in them that you're just like, is that real? Like one time she has a poem where the honeybees are flying through her garden carrying a snake, a dead snake. And you're like, okay, that might have happened. And so this one. Listen, there was a goat's head hanging by ropes in a tree. All night it hung there and sang, and those who heard it felt a hurt in their hearts and thought they were hearing the song of a night bird. They sat up in their beds and then they lay back down again. In the night wind, the goat's head swayed back and forth, and from far off it shone faintly the way the moonlight shone on the train track miles away, beside which the goat's headless body lay. Some boys had hacked its head off. It was harder work than they had imagined. The goat cried like a man and struggled hard, but they finished the job. They hung the bleeding head by the school and then ran off into the darkness that seems to hide everything. The head hung in the tree, the body lay by the tracks, the head called to the body to the head. They missed each other. The missing grew large between them until it pulled the heart right out of the body, until the drawn heart flew toward the head, flew as a bird flies back to its cage and the familiar perch from which it trills. Then the heart sang in the head, softly at first, and then louder, sang long and low until the morning light came up over the school and over the tree, and then the singing stopped. The goat had belonged to a small girl. She named the goat Broken Thorn Sweet Blackberry, named it after the night's bush of stars, because the goat's silky hair was dark as well water, because it had eyes like wild fruit. The girl lived near a high railroad track. At night she heard the trains passing, the sweet sound of the train's horn pouring softly over her bed, and each morning she woke to give the bleating goat his pail of warm milk. She sang him songs about girls with ropes and cooks and boats. She brushed him with a stiff brush. She dreamed daily that he grew bigger, and he did. She thought her dreaming made it so. But one night the girl didn't hear the train's horn, and the next morning she woke to an empty yard. The goat was gone. Everything looked strange. It was as if a storm had passed through while she slept, wind and stones, rain stripping the branches of fruit. She knew that someone had stolen the goat and that he had come to harm. She called to him all morning and into the afternoon. She called and called. She walked and walked. In her chest a bad feeling, like the feeling of the stones gouging the soft undersides of her bare feet. Then somebody found the goat's body by the high tracks, the flies already filling their soft bottles at the goat's torn neck. Then somebody found the head, hanging in a tree by the school. They hurried to take these things away so the girl would not see them. They hurried to raise money to buy the girl another goat. They hurried to find the boys who had done this, to hear them say it was a joke, it was nothing but a joke. But listen, here's the point. The boys thought to have their fun and be done with it. It was harder work than they had imagined, this silly sacrifice, but they finished the job, whistling as they washed their large hands in the dark. What they didn't know was that the goat's head was already singing behind them in the tree. What they didn't know was that the goat's head would go on singing just for them, long after the ropes were down, and that they would learn to listen, pail after pail, stroke after patient stroke. They would wake in the night thinking they heard the wind in the trees or a night bird, but their hearts beating harder. There would be a whistle, a hum, a high murmur, and at last a song. The low song a lost boy sings, remembering his mother's call. Not a cruel song. No, not cruel at all. This song is sweet. It is sweet. The heart dies of this sweetness. So, you see why I said it was mythological, almost biblical? All of her poems are like this. You know, you have this huge world that is created. There's like a mythical, biblical world. And you also see, I mean, this poem could have been written in 3 lines. Some boys cut off a goat's head, and the girl missed her goat. But what's important is the haunting, right? It's like a metaphor for us. Like if we do something, I'm sure all of you can sit here and think of some stupid thing you did when you were a kid that still haunts you. No, they're all shaking their head no. They're all shaking their head, yes, actually. Yes. I'm sure none of us killed any animals, but still, you know, the idea that if you do something like this, you know, and you're a kid, you're innocent, but you know, this is going to haunt you forever. And it's very much, I like the way she's taken this and taken something that is very common and made it into this huge poem. So like in my next book that I have coming out, I have my 4 friends who were killed in a car crash, and I give them an afterlife, but I turned them into things. And the idea came from, if you ever heard the saying, like, her heart turned to stone, right? So one of the children actually turns to stone in the poem. One of the children I made turn into a storm because I wanted her to freaking destroy the South. You know, just come through tornado and then winter storm and just destroy everything. I like that. Okay, but you know, the idea came from the idea that you turn into stone. And what if we made that, what if that became literal? You know, you start with your hands or your feet or your whatever, and you just slowly turn to stone. But you're still moving through the world as stone. So this is what I think she did. You know, she took this idea that something is going to haunt you because it's true. We do something, remember it forever. The people we said something to or did something to don't remember it, but you know, this is the way we work as humans, right? So this big, huge thing happens. So another way to think about your story and to use imagination and to hide your story is to use myths, fairy tales, popular culture. So Judy Garland Tells the Truth of Her Early Career by Emily Rose Cole is a poem that, well, she turns into, it's a persona poem. It's written from the viewpoint of someone else. It's written from the viewpoint of Judy Garland. Okay? So Emily Rose Cole once told me that everything she writes about is true and is based on her family. So I'm like, okay, wait. I'm pretty sure Judy Garland did not actually literally have a bluebird sewn into her throat by her mother. And I'm pretty sure Emily Rose Cole didn't have that either. That doesn't sound like something that's going to really happen. So it's a metaphor, right? Emily Rose Cole, you can actually look her up on YouTube, and there's her singing. Her family was musical, they were in a band, they brought her into the band, and I'm thinking to myself, probably, you know how some parents are, they're a little more harsher than they need to be in order to make you perfect, right? Our parents all want us to be perfect, right? So I suspect they were harsh, not literally cutting open her throat, but in teaching her how to sing and be part of the band. I suspect they were harsh. And she actually does have a poem. Her mother has passed away now, but when her mother was in hospice, when her mother was in hospice, her mother had asked her to sing at her funeral, and her mother, like a few days before she died, had Emily sing the song she was going to sing, and Emily sang it, and her mother just looked at her and said, "I hope you practice." This is not what you want your mother to say as one of her last words to you. What you want to say is, "I love you, you're perfect, you're great, that was wonderful." Okay, so, but I think, you know, that's in one of her poems, in her, hopefully it's still there, for her first book that she's, you know, trying to get published. So, so she wrote a lot of poems, I think, and she says they are, you know, she's hiding the story, right? But she's also telling the story of her childhood. So Judy Garland. Everyone know who Judy Garland is? Very good. No? Judy Garland, Dorothy is her on Wizard of Oz?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. She died June 26th, 1969, is that correct? She was a big hero for the LGBTQ community in the 1960s. So she died, and then the Stonewall riots happened. And it was really, you know, it was, the police were coming into the bars and beating up and arresting the gay men, but at this point they decided to fight back. It was after their big hero had died. And I remember all this because my mother died June 28th, 1969. It's all connected in my head. Okay, because that's the way our brains work, right? So, when I was 3, my mother caught a bluebird and stitched her into my throat while I slept. Seam of sinew sewn to wing, blood pooled into my pillow. I woke with feathers shot through the sticky ropes of my hair. At first I had trouble swallowing, but I learned to gulp around the beating-hearted bulge beneath my chin. When she sang, I turned mockingbird, mimicking her muffled trills, the blue croon of her warbling. At 13, I took off, landed job after job, chased Benzedrine with Hershey kisses. On nights blurred sobby by vodka and sleeping pills, we'd hum lullabies in A minor, and I'd finger the scars threaded to my neck, the ones that held her inside me. At 16, I crammed my toes into a pair of spangled silver heels, threw the deadbolt across my trailer door. I pried those careful stitches out with a rust-edged steak knife and stained my shoes red as she surged from my mouth, wings oiled in blood, song bright as polished tin. She was gone when they found me, escaped out a back window. She left me with scratches on my cheeks, a throat full of feathers, and my own precious blue voice. So, there's a lot to appreciate here, right? There's the, just the gorgeousness of the word choices and the really strong verbs, but there's also just this really imaginative, surreal story. How Judy Garland is a wonderful singer. She sings Over the Rainbow. So, okay? You can Google her. Find her on YouTube. She's pretty awesome. And again, this is hiding the story, though. Writing a persona poem from someone else's viewpoint and hiding the story. Now, you don't have to, when you write a persona poem, you don't have to be hiding the story. You could just be, fascinated by this person's life. Like, I'm not sure, people in history. I know there's people in history who just absolutely fascinate you. Or people in the present day who just absolutely fascinate you. And you want to talk to them, you want to ask them questions. And one way to do that is to write a poem from their point of view. And you make it clear from the beginning you're writing a poem from their point of view. So this next poem is called Skinhead. And it was just that. The poet saw a skinhead he was being interviewed on a TV program, I think on the news program, and she thought to herself, what in the world? How does anyone become a skinhead? What has to happen to you to make you become a skinhead? And so she wrote a poem about it, and I'm going to click over to the YouTube video of her she's a performance poet, right? And you will watch it at the end, it just looks like this poem just took it out of her. That's the thing. If you write a poem from the viewpoint of someone like a skinhead, Adolf Hitler, Genghis Khan, it will take it out of you, right? Because you have to become that person, at least for a little bit, in order to understand them. So it will take it out of you, but that also makes for a great poem.
They call me skinhead, and I got my own beauty. It is knife scrawled across my back in sore, jagged letters. It is in the way my eyes snap away from the obvious. I sit in my dim matchbox on the edge of a bed, tousled with my ragged smell, slide razors across my hair, count how many ways I can bring blood closer to the surface of my skin. These are the duties of the righteous, the ways of the anointed. The face that moves in my mirror is huge and pockmarked, apple-cheeked, scraped pink and brilliant. I am filled with my own spit. 2 years ago, a machine that slices leather sucked in my hand and held it, whacking off 3 fingers at the root. I didn't feel nothing until I looked down and saw them on the floor next to my boot heel, and I ain't worked since then. I sit here and watch niggers take over my TV set, walking like kings up and down the sidewalks in my head. My shoulders tell me that ain't right, so I move out into the sun, where my beauty makes them lower their heads. I was born to make things right. It's easy now to bend my big body into shadows, to move from a place where there was nothing into the stark circle of a streetlight, the pipe raised up high over my head. It's a kick to watch their eyes get big, round and gleaming like cartoon jungle boys, just in that second before they know the pipe's gonna come down. And I got this thing I like to say, hey, listen to this. I like to say, hey nigga! Abe Lincoln it's been dead a long time. I get hard just listening to their skin burst. I was born to make things right. Then this reporter comes around. Seems I was a little sloppy kicking some fag's ass, and he opens up and screams about it. So this reporter finds me at home in bed. The TV flashes, licking my face clean. Same old shit. I ain't got no job. The colors and spics got 'em. Why not working? Look at my hand, asshole. No, I'm not part of no organized group. I'm just a white boy who loves his race, fighting for a pure country. Sometimes it's just me. Sometimes 3. Sometimes 30. AIDS will take care of the faggots. Then it's gonna be white on black in the streets. Then there'll be 3 million. I tell him that. So he writes it up, and I come off looking like I'm some kind of goddamn freak, like I'm Hitler himself. I ain't that lucky, but I've got my own beauty. It's in my steel-toed boots, in the hard corners of my shaved head. I look in the mirror, and I hold up my mangled hand. Only the baby finger left. I know it's the wrong finger, but fuck you all anyway. I am riding the top rung of the perfect race, my face scraped pink and brilliant. I'm your baby, America, your boy. Drunk on my own spit, I am goddamn fucking beautiful. And I was born and raised right here.
Okay, you see how powerful that poem is. And this is, I imagine many of you probably like to do performance poetry or enjoy watching performance poetry. And it's, you know, the one thing that I noticed about performance poems is you have to memorize your poems. And it's something I can memorize other people's poems, but not my own. So I cannot do this. But I also noticed, you know, it's a powerful poem. The poem itself is powerful. It's a clear story. It would be, I think, in a performance poem, you'd be less likely to use similes. Assets of alliteration, I think, would be important because that's music that people can hear. But similes, I think, would, you know, it's more enjoyed when it's on the page and you're reading it. But clear story, powerful story, and performed powerfully. And but there is, you know, there's still. They call me skinhead, and I got my own beauty. It is knife scrawled across my back in sore, jagged letters. It's in the way my eyes snap away from the obvious. So there's still a very powerful word choice, very powerful verbs. And there is this, I mean, there's a simile. I sit in my dim matchbox. There's a small house, right? On the edge of a bed, tousled with my ragged smell, slide razors across my hair, count how many ways I can bring blood closer to the surface of my skin. So there's still, you know, very powerful images, powerful verbs, tousled, raggled, slide razors. A very powerful poem, very powerful word choice, strong verbs. And then, you know, I love when she does something like unusual. Like when I'm thinking about someone beating somebody up, trying to murder them, I don't think to myself, where's the line? I am made hard. I was born. I don't know where the line is.
It's under the italicized at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. I get hard listening to their skin burst. I mean, I never would have thought to write that line. So, you know, it's just this very powerful poem. Patricia Smith, she has a number of books published. So this is a poem that also works on the page. That's our best performance poets, right? The poem works, performed, it also works on the page. And she has a lot of published books. So that's something to think about when you write performance poems. They still need to work on the page. Okay? Now this is, you know, just talk about persona poems just a little bit more. I really like them because they really do show that, you know, you're paying attention to the world. You know, I hate to admit this, but I never really thought about the fact that in fairy tales, all the mothers are dead. And you would think, of all people, my mother dead, and that's all I ever write about. You would think, oh yeah, she would notice that, but I didn't. And actually, you know, I was a student at the University of Virginia. I was actually pre-med, majoring in biochemistry. And I was walking through the halls, and one of my teachers had the poem Gretel in Darkness, posted on her door. Gretel in Darkness by Louise Glück. So it's a persona poem written from the viewpoint of Gretel, as in the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel. And it begins, "This is the world we wanted. All who would have seen us dead are dead. I hear the witch's cry break in the moonlight through a sheet of sugar God rewards. Her tongue shrivels into gas. Now, far from women's arms and memory of women, in our father's hut we sleep, are never hungry." And I was like, holy crap, that's my life. Right there, that is my life. And I said, yep, this is what I want to do. I want to be a poet. So, persona poems can be very powerful, and they can tell your life without you actually saying, this is my life. Okay? So, and then the other thing you can, with persona poems, you can look at the world around you and change the story. So, like in this poem by Emily Rose Cole, I know all of you are going to recognize this game, this video game. You're going to tell me what it is, because I don't know. Mario, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I guess, I never played the game, but I guess there's a princess who needs to be rescued. Okay, so Emily Rose Cole said, why does the princess always need to be rescued? Let's just have that princess rescue herself. And she's going to write this poem also. Your princess leaves the castle. Trust me, honey, I know this hellhole better than you do. I've spent half my life locked under a turtle shell. While you bounce in the back, wade through the pipes, I open doors with my hairpins and explored. I know this place, and I'm sick of it. For years, you've solved every problem by stepping on it. It's simple for you. Pulverize the henchmen, emasculate the boss, watch me swoon. Well, joke's on you, Mario. I quit. While you were doing mushrooms and grubbing coins, I learned a hot wire engine in under a minute. You'd barely recognize me dressed in blue jeans and flannel, hair bobbed. I don't pretend I'm safe. The road I'm clipping over is littered with banana peels and walking bombs. But I can tell you this, I'm not in another castle. Don't come looking. You won't find me.